This PowerPoint will introduce you to Unit 3, which covers the early histories of countries in East Asia, China, Korea, and Japan. We will review the geography of East Asia, look over the chronology of major periods in the history of each of these countries, and then introduce the assignments. Please remember to check your calendar and the activities under Unit 3 in Content to see what your instructor has assigned and when those assignments are due. Those may include a quiz, discussion, and essay. Let us look at the ways in which you can do your best on each of them. First, let's look at the geography of East Asia as it pertains to the history covered in this unit. Ancient China's history took place primarily in China proper. To the east, China proper is bounded by the Yellow Sea, the East China Sea, and South China Sea. To the south, it is bordered by the mountainous jungles of Southeast Asia, where countries like Myanmar, Laos, and Vietnam are located today. To the west and north, China is surrounded by a transitional frontier zone where land suited to agriculture gives way to mountains, plateaus, and vast expanses of steppe grasslands and desert. Within China proper, the Yellow River and Yangtze River are particularly important. The Yellow River meanders through the northern half of China, where a cool, dry climate is well suited to wheat and millet farming. Along its middle and lower reaches, we find the North China Plain, which is where much of China's early history transpired. But the Yangtze River is just as important. It is located in South China, where the warmer and wetter weather is well suited to rice paddy agriculture. Over time, early Chinese dynasties expanded in this direction. To the east of China, located between the Sea of Japan and the Pacific Ocean, we find Japan. Japan is an island country with 4 main islands and many smaller ones. This archipelago is covered by mountains and traversed by rivers, so only about 15% of the land is suited to agriculture. Much of that fertile land is located in the Kenai and Kanto plains, where much of Japan's early history was centered. The Korean Peninsula is the location of North and South Korea today. Extending roughly 1,100 kilometers southward from the Asian landmass, the peninsula is bounded by seas to the east, west, and south, and defined by the Yalu River to the north. Like Japan, Korea is also mountainous, although coastal areas and plains located to the west and south were suited to agriculture. For China, you will look at a series of dynasties extending from the first one, the Xia dynasty, through the Yuan dynasty. The slide provides a list of major ones. These dynasties extend over 3 millennia that were rich with many changes and developments. You will not only learn about political history and developments from one dynasty to the next, but also about Confucius and Confucianism, Taoism, the first emperor of China and his terracotta warriors, the Silk Road, the 3 Kingdoms, foot binding, the Mongol conquest of China, and many other topics. Take this opportunity to learn this history by reading through the book carefully. This map shows you the territory of the Tang Dynasty in 700 CE. For the period of time under study, that is when the native Chinese dynasty reached its greatest territorial extent. This chapter not only covers the early history of China, but also the early histories of 2 other countries in East Asia, Japan and Korea. 4 periods in Japan's history are covered: the Jomon period, the Yayoi period, the Mounded Tomb period, and the Asuka Nara period. The map shows you the Yamato Kingdom, which was the first kingdom in Japan's history. It emerges only during the first millennium AD, during the Mounded Tomb period. The following periods in Korea's history are covered in this section: an early historical period when the Korean peninsula was covered by a mosaic of chiefdom confederations and petty kingdoms, the 3 Kingdoms period, and the Silla dynasty. This map shows you what Korea looked like in the 6th century CE, or the 500s, when 3 major kingdoms dominated the peninsula. First, to begin with the quiz, perhaps the most important thing to remember is that this is a quiz on the textbook reading. The questions are not trying to trick you, but are testing whether you read the chapter for this unit carefully. I would strongly recommend reading the entire chapter first, and then having the reading in front of you when you attempt the quiz, so you can double-check your answers. Also, pay close attention to the key terms and questions to guide your reading located on the beginning of the chapter. For this discussion, if assigned by your instructor, we look at Lu Xong biographies of exemplary women. Lu Xong was an important scholar who lived during the Han Dynasty. He was a member of the imperial family. During the Han Dynasty, the government and its officials promoted Confucian moral education for both men and women. Lu wrote this book specifically for the moral education of women, and it is the earliest extant book devoted to this purpose. Lu believed that by gathering stories from earlier works about women who exemplified Confucian virtues in their lives, other women would be inspired to follow their example and therefore to cultivate these virtues. To learn about the historical background, be sure to read about Confucius and Confucianism in our book, as well as the Han Dynasty. Then look at and read a selection of these biographies included in the chapter on the principled and righteous. For the essay, if assigned by your instructor, you are asked to compare Confucian, Taoist, and legalist ideas about how people should be governed. To do so, review what happened in China during the long Zhou dynasty and the Qing dynasty. As the book explains, during the later Zhou dynasty, the Warring States period, China fell into disarray as several states warred with one another for right to rule the land. It was in this context that individuals engaged in philosophical reflection on what was needful to restore order and a good society. These individuals were later categorized Confucians, Taoists, and legalists. With the historical background in mind, read the selections on governing from Confucius's Analects, the Laozi, and the Han Faiths. These are respectively Confucian, Taoist, and legalist texts, and the selections introduce the putative author. To write this essay, introduce the historical setting, these three texts and their authors, or putative authors, and the topic of the paper. The topic for this paper is Confucian, Taoist, and legalist ideas about how people should be governed, and their similarities or differences. Explain these ideas based strictly on these three primary sources. Go to these ancient sources for yourself and develop your insights based on them, and explain your reasoning based on them. That means quoting or paraphrasing them as necessary to explain your thinking. Then conclude. The essay should be about 800 words. Write in complete sentences and paragraphs. Use our sources and cite them. Introducing materials from other sources risks plagiarism and should be avoided. Refer to the guidelines for writing your essay for additional writing assignment criteria. Once you have completed the writing assignment, please attach and submit your assignment.